Hi, Tom Hughes with you again. We're talking with Scott Bender. He is the chairman of the Human Rights Commission in Red Wing. And coming up November 19th, the Doctrine of Discovery will be shown, and I'm going to let him tell us all about it.
The Doctrine of Discovery is actually a brand new video that talks about our U.S. government's relation with Native nations across the country and how it came to be that the U.S. government pretty much tells them what they can and can't do. The Doctrine of Discovery is based on papal edicts, different popes, even as far back as 1350, who issued what we call papal bulls. And one of those, issued by Alexander VI in 1493, actually deals specifically with our part of the world. And the idea was that any conquering Christian powers had the right to take the land. They not only took the land, but by these papal bulls, they took the people. Once they baptized the different people across the continents or the islands, those people were pretty much eligible for enslavement. They had no rights to any property, and based on that papal bull of 1493, our very young Supreme Court issued a series of rulings by which, to this day, natives have no right to ownership, only to occupancy.
Really?
Yeah, by this doctrine, the people out on Prairie Island, for instance, they have the Prairie Island Indian community, we call it. By this doctrine, that is U.S. government land. The people there can stay on it, but they don't own it.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and this was reaffirmed only a little more than a year ago by the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals out in California, a lawsuit involving, among other things, some human ancestral remains. And even just a year ago, the court ruling, again, Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, August of 2014, said that in our country, Aboriginals have only the right to occupancy. They stressed very adamantly this is not a right of ownership. It's only a right of occupancy granted by the sovereign power, that would be us, the United States, granted by and protected by the sovereign power.
And this was reaffirmed just recently?
A year and a few months ago.
Doesn't that seem odd to you?
It does, because we have what we call Indian policy that's based on church doctrine issued almost 500 years ago, and it continues to be the basis for how our government deals with Native nations.
So what does Doctrine of Discovery mean?
The Doctrine of Discovery is what we call the set of papal bulls. And you know, here, Tom, this is pretty bizarre. They initially were issued because at that time, the earliest bulls, Spain, for instance, had just been what the Christians would call freed from Muslim domination, several centuries of Muslim domination. And initially, the earliest papal bulls were authorizing Christians to go out and spread Christianity by the sword, you know, driving back the Muslims. And just by pretty ugly coincidence, it was in that earlier time that Christopher Columbus came into the Caribbean, and you know, a whole different part of the world that Europeans didn't realize existed, all of a sudden, pretty much by papal decree, had to be open to Christian conquest.
Because the world was flat, right? Didn't Columbus, wasn't that part of his voyage to find out that the world...
No, even Columbus himself said he had always read and heard that the world was round. That goes way back to the Greeks, which in Columbus's, one of his letters to the Queen, he even outlined some of the Greek experiments that showed that the world was round. But the idea was pretty much money. You know, here's new land.
Sure.
Land is resources, resources money, money is power. If the Christians get the land before what they called the infidels or the Saracens, the wealth would pour into the Christian church coffers instead of the Islamic coffers. And so, you know, we have this doctrine of discovery, as we call it, that our court system has repeatedly said our U.S. government right to the land based on the conquest of the European powers who we have superseded Their wars of conquest, coupled with ours, give us the right to the land, and natives only the right to occupancy as long as we see fit. This is another thing that Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals affirmed when they threw in that line about granted and protected by the sovereign power.
So the Doctrine of Discovery, that's a movie?
It's about a 58-minute long video that we'll be showing on the 19th of November in the City Council chambers. It is totally free of cost. We'll start a little bit after 7, and the idea is just to help people across our area understand that we have a U.S. government policy rooted in church doctrine. In spite of our separation of church and state thing, this is very firmly rooted in church doctrine that some of our early Supreme Court justices, John Marshall, built into early court rulings, and every case dealing with native property rights is referred back to that initial Johnson versus McIntosh and Worcester versus Georgia are two of the early court rulings. And this video, the movie goes through the whole process by which the church doctrine became incorporated into our legal system and continues to be the basis of our Indian policy.
Wow. So if you want to know more about this, go to the Human Rights Commission. It will be November 19th, City Council chambers. It's called The Doctrine of Discovery. Scott Bender, Chairman of the Human Rights Commission. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Tom Hughes. Thanks a lot for watching Red Wings Channel 6.